Well, as an African-American gay man, and to a certain degree as a Quaker, Bayard was faced with discrimination and with prejudice throughout his life, certainly through the early part of his life. Being any of those things, including being Quaker, was not the most common thing in the American society. And so he struggled with discrimination in the larger society, but also in the religious community and within the Quaker community itself. And certainly as a gay man, I mean, there was no question that he was discriminated against. Not necessarily always in this, I would say, crude or overt kind of fashion, but, you know, there was always this kind of subtle undertone about, well, you know, what do we do with Bayard? My name is Walter Nagel. I live in New York City, in Manhattan. I am currently employed by the Religious Society of Friends, the New York Yearly Meeting. I am not officially a Quaker, and I am not a member of a monthly meeting, but my late partner, Bayard Rustin, was a longtime member of 15th Street Meeting here in New York City. Bayard Rustin was an African-American gay male Quaker who was very influential in the African-American civil rights movement in our country. That is primarily what people would associate him with, because he was the organizer of the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where Dr. King gave his most famous speech. But Bayard had been involved in struggles for social justice, you know, for 20 plus years before that, and certainly 25 years after that. Bayard was working very closely with the fellowship. Well, he was in the Fellowship of Reconciliation, and he was on the staff of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. And in 1953, Bayard was on a speaking engagement in Pasadena, California, for the American Friends Service Committee, and he was arrested on a morals, what was then called a morals charge. He was caught having sexual relations in a public place. It was in the middle of the night. It was on a dark street. It was not out in broad daylight and Saturday afternoon or anything like that. But nevertheless, he was arrested. And I guess it was in 1953 or 1954, shortly before the African-American struggle really took off in Montgomery. A small group of Quakers gathered at Pendle Hill Study Center in Pennsylvania to produce a document on what was then called the Cold War, the struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. And after several days of meeting and discernment and discussion, they produced a document called Speak Truth to Power, which I have right here. Despite the fact that Bayard was a very important part of that group, in fact, he has been credited with coining the phrase "Speak Truth to Power," his name was left off the document. So, you know, I mean, I see that as certainly as a form of discrimination and persecution, if you will, because, you know, all of the people, or most of the people, at least the ones that I've spoken to on the committee, felt that he made an invaluable contribution to that document, and it would not have been the document that it was without Bayard's contribution. Now, in all fairness to the AFSC, they restored his name to the document in 2012, which was the centennial year of Bayard's birth. Well, when people think about Bayard Rustin, I think there are a couple of things that are important, which might not be so readily available when you Google him, if you will, or when you do some of the research. One of them, I think, certainly is the importance of the Quaker values, the Quaker value system that was instilled in him as a young person. Bayard believed in the oneness of the human family, in the brotherhood, sisterhood of all people. He believed in the power of nonviolence, which comes out of that belief in the oneness of all people. And he saw everybody as his brothers and sisters. It was not just about black folks or gay folks or any subgroup that he might have been a member of. He saw everybody certainly as equal in the eyes of the divine, if you will. The other thing I think that would be important is that, Bayard was a very gentle and loving and fun, very humorous person. He worked with young people. He recruited young people. And young people flocked to him because at that time he was still seen as a very radical figure. And I think young people tend to be attracted to those most radical voices. And so a lot of those people remember him fondly, even though some of them disagreed with him later on, and as they developed and they went their separate ways from some of Bayard's ideas. But they still remembered that quality of his helping them. And so his voice continues to be one that people want to hear from and listen to, and serve as a source of inspiration.
Thanks for watching this Quaker Speak video. We release a new video every other Thursday. You can watch all our videos in this playlist here. You can subscribe to our channel by clicking this button here. You can support us through our Patreon here. Thanks again for watching, and have a happy Thursday.